Sonic music. What the hell is happening? Through thick and thin, through all of its ups and downs, there was at least one positive we fans could always say, despite it all. At least the soundtrack slaps. But as the game started to establish a sort of consistency, at least as far as general reception goes, I find the music to be lacking more and more. I feel that the Sonic series as of late hasn't been living up to its musical legacy. From Lost World to Crossworlds, none of these Sonic games have had outstanding OSTs, some even poorer OSTs. Looking at you, Shadow Gens and Dream Team. Crossworlds is kind of the straw that's breaking the camel's back for me. Sonic Colors was the last OST that truly felt great and authentic to Sonic. Since then, it's been generic music and EDM galore. There were two essentials, and a Sonic soundtrack has to have at least one of them to be good in my opinion. Those essentials are style and variety. Sonic soundtracks since Colors has been missing either one or both of those qualities. I'm not going to be discussing Generations because it's an anniversary game. Its soundtrack is predominantly composed of remixes and arrangements of pre-existing songs as a result, and all of the music it does have to call its own is not doing it any favors, let's be real. When was the last time you went out of your way to listen to the Time Eater boss theme? Right, I thought so. Sonic Lost World is a decent OST overall, but the soundtrack is overly generic and lacks the Sonic identity to stand out. It has its jams and good tunes like a Double Down, Sea Bottom Segway, Honeycomb Highway, Windy Hills, Snowball Waltz, and Desert Ruins got them hits for real. Zone 1 and 4 go crazy, bro, especially Zone 1. I think that genuinely may be the most underrated song from that game. Lost World has a good number of bops like this all across its soundtrack, with the soundtrack being decently varied as well. The problem is just that it lacks style, and by style I mean the Sonic essence. You could easily put these songs in any other platformer, and you know you miss with the Sonic soundtrack when that's the case, okay? Forces is also a decent soundtrack, but take the Avatar and classic stage themes, both of which I am no fan of, and the majority of that soundtrack is forgettable and bland. What doesn't help is how synth heavy it is. Even the tracks that I am willing to admit are good, the synth being the lead in most of them makes it all blend together and all the more forgettable. Some of you guys might have been following with me and even maybe agreeing with me up until this point, but this is where we might start disagreeing quite a bit. I already know a lot of people are going to get on my case talking some Frontiers is an exception though, and to that I say, understand where I'm coming from. Yes, I acknowledge that Frontiers has its bangers, just like I did with Lost World and Forces. Oh, well, did I acknowledge Forces bangers? Well, Forces does have bangers, okay? It does, okay? We got Arsenal Pyramid, Park Avenue, stuff like that. Okay, Forces does have its bangers. Moonlight Battlefield, okay? I acknowledge them now. I did it before, but I did now. Lost World and Forces both have their bangers, and I acknowledge that Frontiers has its bangers as well. However, the vast majority of the Frontiers OST is made up of cyberspace stage themes, nearly all of which I strongly dislike. With that in mind, over half the soundtrack just doesn't land for me, with only a select few of the island themes standing out as not generic, And of course, there's Sonic Superstars, can't forget to mention that as well. That soundtrack it's always been pretty polarizing, since it ever even first released. It's all over the place, both quality-wise, composition-wise. You can tell that multiple people worked on it and that they weren't all on the same page while doing so. Jun Sonoe's contributions to the soundtrack are easily the worst it has to offer, unfortunately, and T-Lopes just kind of carries, because that's kind of just what he does, but there's only so much that T-Lope can carry on his back, man, and I'm afraid the few tracks that he did contribute aren't enough to uphold Superstars as a great soundtrack on their own, but Superstars, it's a middling soundtrack. It's not great, it's not horrible, but it's average, it's mid, and that simply does not get you far when you're going against legends, the absolute stellar soundtracks that are in the Sonic series catalog. You know, being middle of the road just simply isn't good enough. It isn't. And I already know a lot of people don't see many issues with this one, but the Shadow Gens OST, man, I do have problems with it, okay? I do, a lot. I am tired of EDM taking over the majority of Sonic OSTs, man. I am. I just don't like the direction of the Shadow Gens OST. The problem with the oversaturation of EDM in recent Sonic titles is that it limits those games' abilities to instill a variety of emotion within the player. For instance, let's look at Kingdom Valley, which in of itself is a mid-remix in Shadow Gens because it doesn't do much to arrange the original, and the changes it does make detract from what made the original track stand out in the first place. Anyway, in Sonic 06, when you hear Kingdom Valley in Sonic Story, things are dire, stakes are high, and you gotta keep it moving. The gloomy atmosphere helps accentuate this feeling, and then the music pushes the sense of urgency, feeling just as oppressive as the Kingdom Valley stage itself. Shadow Gen says, fuck that, and gives us just another rave. We can also look at Final Rush. Once again, stakes are high and you got places to be. A race to the Eclipse Cannon to stop a cataclysmic event. You're shredding on rails and the guitar shreds with you, keeping pace with your mad dash through the Space Colony arc. All this opposed to the carefree rockin' jingle you started the story with. While I love the Final Rush remix in Shadow Gens immensely, made a whole ass edit to that shit, it's phenomenal, it blends in as just another rave in the soundtrack. Musically, it feels like nearly every stage is meant to elicit only one feeling: dance. That's a problem because it takes away from the sense of growing tension, and the sense of finality when approaching the game's end. Radical Highway Act 1, being the final zone of the game, starts off great. It's almost chilling how distant the instrumentals feel, immersing you in the silence of the night that the stage takes place in. Then they immediately throw it all away. Time to party again. And then Act 2? The actual final stage before the boss? I mean, come on. Where's the finality in any of that? To me, a great soundtrack is one that moves me, and I don't just mean bopping my head or hitting a little jiggy, I mean moves me as in the heart, the soul. A variety of songs and song styles that are specially tailored for the moments that they play during, allowing those moments to feel that much more impactful and therefore memorable. Music plays an irreplaceable role in game design and game flow, especially when done at its best, and we'd be better off not overlooking that as much as we do, honestly. All this brings us to Sonic Racing Crossworlds. The spin-offs have just about as much of a reputation for having banger soundtracks as the mainline entries do, so it ain't getting slack in that regard. Was every composer they got on the soundtrack having an off day or something? Because this soundtrack, from what we've heard so far, is so uncharacteristically poor for Sonic that it actually disheartens me. Some of these tracks sound like prototypes pulled from an uninspired mobile game that never saw the light of day, and they went, well, might as well use these tracks that we spent money on somewhere. No back-to-back, no Wicked Wild, and the callbacks that we do get to Sonic musical catalog are all butchered instrumentally because this is not Metal Harbor. I don't know, man. I guess to wrap up my thoughts on this, right? Rants on even longer, start losing track. It's just starting to feel like that the one thing we Sonic fans have always been able to rely on is being lost, in my honest opinion. These soundtracks aren't hitting like they used to. Probably just me though, I'm sure, and that's okay. This is an opinion I stand firmly by. I'm concerned over the musical direction of the Sonic series, because it would be a damn shame to lose one of the greatest qualities that it's known for. But yeah, that's the video. Tell me your thoughts if you feel like it. And fuck Chaos Island Act 1.